Is there such a thing as a soulmate? Well, no, not really. I know that really goes against our thinking today. We have such an over-romanticized concept of marriage, that there's that special, super perfect person out there. And if I can just find that super perfect person, I'll be happy. And everybody's running around trying to find, you know, that one person. And you see it in all the movies, particularly the chick flicks, the romantic flicks. It makes for a great movie, watching two people try and find each other. But the truth is, it's not based in reality. There is no special one person that's going to make you happy. And the church doesn't really help out much better either, because we come along and then we spiritualize the same nonsense by saying, God created a special person just for you. You need to find just that right person that God created for you. I mean, how insane is that? First of all, the Bible never says anything like that. And secondly, is this not the epitome of selfishness? Think what we're saying. God in heaven created another human being just to make you happy. I mean, if that is not the epitome of selfishness, I don't know what is. God didn't make someone else just for you. That's ludicrous. What is the key to a successful relationship? It's not about finding the right person. A successful relationship is based on two people doing the right things. And if you'll do the right things, you'll succeed. It's that simple. If you don't, you'll fail. And that's just equally as simple. The reason why people are struggling so hard today is not because they haven't found the right person. It's because they're doing all the wrong things. So I think the whole emphasis of trying to find that special cosmic person is a big mistake. That's not to say that single people shouldn't be thoughtful in the process. You want to find a good person. I mean, don't marry an idiot. People do that all the time, particularly women who think, well, I can change him. You know, don't think like that. If it acts like a skunk, it walks like a skunk, and it smells like a skunk, it's a skunk. Move on. You know, don't marry obvious people that are nothing but problems in your life. So be as thoughtful as you can, but don't get caught up in this idea of it has to be that one special person today. It's just not good thinking. It's certainly not biblically sound, and it doesn't even make common sense. Find a good person. If you'll do the right things, virtually any two people in the world can succeed. That's the power of principles like love and patience and long-suffering, which means to suffer a long time, of forgiveness. All that stuff, those principles are so powerful that they'll work in virtually any relationship if people will implement them. But they're not doing it today. They're ignoring these principles, hoping that it should just be automatic and easy if I find the right person. So they're out there chasing, trying to find the right person, thinking that, you know, I've finally found the right one, and then they get married, and then they're miserable. Then they'll come to someone like me and say, Pastor, I made a mistake. I said, no, you're making a mistake if you're thinking that way. It's not about that. The reason people are expecting marriage to be easy is because of this ridiculous thinking of a soulmate. The concept is, if you'll find the right person, then it's easy. Then they'll automatically know what you need in life, and you'll be on the same cosmic wavelength, meeting each other's needs, which is just ridiculous. If you want someone to meet your needs, you need to communicate those needs to someone. Don't sit around thinking, gee, if he really loved me, I wouldn't have to tell him. Of course you have to tell him. Nobody can tell. Nobody's walking around with ESP in their brains, particularly men. Unless you happen to be married to a really, really sensitive person, they're not going to know. And there's even people who are real sensitive who still miss stuff. I mean, you know, marriage is hard. It's always been hard. And the Bible is clear about it. It's not like the Bible's holding out on us. In my seminar, I read those 2 verses of the scripture where it says, it's good for a man not to get married. And then he goes on and says, because those who marry will have trouble in this life. That's the Bible's take on it. No one said that it was going to be easy. In fact, it's very clear. It's hard. It can be difficult. Now, the alternative is what? Being single all your life? It's not like that's a picnic. The truth is, life is hard, period. All of life is hard. People today who are trying to expect life to be easy don't get it, and they struggle in life. Not only do they expect their marriages to be easy, they expect raising their kids to be easy. There's a crazy concept. They think their jobs should be easy, that all their relationships with everyone in their life should be easy, going to church should be easy, everyone should always be nice to them. It's all based on some form of selfishness at some level. Life is not easy. It's never been easy. But if you want to succeed, it's worth the work. If you want to get paid, you have to do the work. If you'll do the work, you'll get paid. You can't just walk into a company at random up to the payroll office and say, I'd like a check. Well, no, you didn't do anything. Yeah, but that's not love. I'm going to a Christian company. I mean, how crazy is this? This is the way people live. They expect payoff in life, payoff in their relationships, payoff with their kids, payoff with their families, payoff with their churches, but they don't want to really do anything. If you find the right church, the right people, all that should come naturally. It's nonsense. Is it okay to have expectations in marriage? Sure, that's only normal. That's natural. Nobody comes to the altar thinking, gee, I hope we'll have an average life. Nobody comes to the altar thinking, gee, I hope we fail. I mean, everybody comes with the highest of expectations, and that's fine. Just let them be realistic expectations. Don't let them be foolish expectations. Don't expect that this one man is going to meet all the emotional needs of your life. I mean, no man is wired for that. A lot of times I run into women who are so frustrated because their husband isn't their very best friend all the time, wanting to do everything with them. I mean, no one person is wired to do that, particularly your husband. Go out, have some girlfriends, have a life, get involved in church, get involved in other things. No one man is designed to meet all of your emotional needs. That would be unrealistic. Men do the same thing. A lot of guys come into marriage thinking, well, this will be great. I get to have all the sex I want whenever I want it, Hello? Not likely to happen. Again, that's an unrealistic expectation. Now, can you have an expectation of a great sex life? Well, of course. But, everything just has to be based in reality. A lot of people's frustration is because they have such high expectations that are virtually impossible to be achieved in marriage. Marriage is not heaven. All right? When you die, then you get to go to heaven. We're still on earth, and there's imperfections, and there's struggles, and there's frustrations. Welcome to life. And it's not like God didn't warn us that it would be difficult. Life is difficult, but it's wonderful. And it's great. So just have the best of anticipation, the best of expectations, set the best of goals. Just don't set them so high or so unrealistically that it actually winds up destroying and discouraging you. Yeah, if you go into marriage thinking that marriage is a 50-50 proposition, you'll fail. You'll absolutely fail. Marriage is a 100% proposition. If you go in trying to think, well, I'm going to give half and wait for the other person to give half back, and who sets that measurement? Where do you draw the line? How do you determine when something's half? And what are you going to do? You hit a certain point and then you start holding back on your affection? Start holding back on your money? Start holding back on your time? I'm sorry, honey. I've given you, whatever allotment I have for the day, and then move on. I mean, it's just ridiculous. No such thing as a 50-50 deal. It's 100% both ways. Do I really have to talk to my spouse about things that do not interest me? Yes, of course you do. That's just common courtesy. If someone starts talking to you in any discussion, anywhere, you don't suddenly just go, not interested, and walk away. That would be rude. That would be insulting. I mean, why couples do that to each other is horrifying. I mean, just show common courtesy. If your spouse is talking to you about something you don't really care about, at a minimum, just be polite and respond. And, now if at some point it becomes so horrifying, then I suppose you can say something. I'll do that to my wife. I mean, she frequently will discuss things with me that I could not possibly care less about. Something she saw at the store or this or that. Who cares? But saying, gee, who cares, is a formula for disaster. I try and be nice, and I try and be polite. And if it's something that continues on and on and on, I'll at some point just say, please, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm not interested in what you're talking about. And then she'll slug me or something. And then we can still laugh about it and move on. But yeah, just show common courtesy. Men who respond to their wives in rude ways and say, I'm not interested in that, and be insulting. And then these are the same men who complain, I wonder how come I'm not getting any sex. Well, because you're a nitwit. That's why. Be nice. Be polite. Yes, you can and should discuss issues that are not of interest to you at all. Why is communicating so hard now that we're married when before we got married there were no communication problems? Well, because when you were dating, that wasn't real life. I mean, dating is the biggest bogus part of life. I mean, everybody's telling everybody what they want to hear, and everybody's living in this false drug-induced state of romance. It's not real life. You don't really discover life until you put on the ring and you really commit to each other and you start living life together. That's when the real challenges come in. And everybody has these challenges. And because you're so close to each other, it can get difficult at times. But, there's nothing wrong. A lot of relationships are like that, even with your children. I mean, there's people who have children who are just very problematic, very, troublesome and don't want to behave, but then take those same kids and put them with someone else, send them over to the neighbors or to an uncle or something, and suddenly they're the most well-behaved kids in the world, and you think, what's the deal? How come you don't behave that way with me? Well, because they're not with them all the time. When you're with somebody all the time, it just gets harder. There's, everything's so connected to everything, and at some point, it gets to be a struggle. But that's normal. Why can't my spouse just say what they mean? Because very few people speak only after they've completely thought through what they wanted to say. I mean, that's part of communication. You start talking, you don't really know what you want to say. You don't really know how you feel about things. Again, just common courtesy. When you're talking to your spouse, don't holler at them and say, well, just get to the point. Why don't you just say what you mean? Well, they don't know. They're talking it through. That's normal. Discussing things, bouncing ideas off of, finding someone else. Even, in my relationships around the office and in the church, I frequently have to bring someone in and just start talking it through, kicking ideas back and forth. What about this? What about that idea? What about that idea? And that's how you start coming to what you really feel about a particular situation. So to get on a spouse because they're not quite sure what they mean yet, let me know and then we'll talk, is very rude and highly unrealistic. That's how people discover how they feel. They talk it through. If you have a spouse who never talks, well, yeah, you have a communication problem. I can't fix that. They need to be realistic. They need to talk. They need to open up. Now, they may not want to talk, may not want to open up. You might need to just talk about the not talking and find out if there's issues. Sometimes the reason people don't talk is because when they do, they don't feel safe. They feel ridiculed, or they feel challenged, or they feel put down at some level. And They learn the safest thing for me to do is not to say anything. So if you have a spouse who never wants to talk, you need to make sure that when you do talk with them, that it's safe when they talk. You know, that you're not saying stuff, well, that's stupid. What do you think like that for? Or, well, that's wrong. I mean, you talk that way to me, I'm fine. You know, my Puerto Rican blood loves an argument. You know, I love debating stuff and fights. But a lot of people aren't wired that way. The minute you start challenging them and their ideas and their feelings at any level, they begin to shut down. They don't feel safe. You know, we do that whole flag page program with couples. You get someone with a very high peace score in their life. They can be very quiet people. Not because they don't care, not because they're not concerned. They don't feel safe and respected to share their opinions often. And you put them in an environment like that, and they're very quiet. I don't know if you've ever seen someone who's real quiet in some situations, but then just talks like crazy in others. Why? Because in the second situation, they feel very safe to be themselves. They talk la 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 la. They never shut up. Then you put them in a different environment. Suddenly they're very quiet, very reserved. Again, they're not being mean. They're not trying to rob anybody of their emotions. It's usually they don't feel safe. So when I tell women that they need to take from a man, it's not like hold out your hand and take it like they're giving it to you. I mean, plunge your hand into their chest and rip out their heart. I mean, you've got to go get it. They're not going to give it to you. So don't be shocked that you actually have to go and mine out stuff from your husband. Remember, women are givers, men, by and large, are takers. You want something from a guy, girls, you need to go get it. And when I share this in the seminars, I get more static from women, more defenses, more alarms go off in their heads. Because women are fundamentally very uncomfortable in taking in their relationships. But if you're going to get anything from a guy, you're going to have to break through that and learn how to take from them. What's interesting is you would think the men would be upset by this concept, but they're not. They're totally comfortable with it. Yeah, you want something from me? You need to take it. They're not bothered by it. It's the ladies, the girls. They have got this idea in their head that if he really loved me, I wouldn't have to ask. And other ridiculously positioned ideas in their heads. No, you need to go take it. Reach out, get it from him. The big question I get is, well, wait a minute. I tried that. I asked more than once, and I asked the right way, and and he still wouldn't do it. Look, this is not rocket science. This is not a guaranteed formula for success every time. This is a pattern of how you deal with a man. Don't try it out once to see if it works or not, because then you'll just give up. There might be times where you will ask the right way, ask bartering, ask more than once, and he still won't do it. If he still doesn't do it, well, for the love of God, just move on. You know, if he won't fix the toilet and you've asked half a dozen times and you asked the right way, and just call a plumber. Why destroy your marriage because you can't get him to do something? Well, because I think he should. Well, there's a lot of things in life that should, but they just don't always. So don't get freaked out and discouraged that even with my formulas, they're not absolutely foolproof. They're not all foolproof. I never said that they were. These are basic concepts and ideas on how to deal with men. Given your best effort, sometimes you either just need to go do it yourself or call somebody else. If you've asked a man lots of times to do something, even after 15 years, he still doesn't put away his laundry, and shouldn't he know by now? I don't know. I suppose if he doesn't, what are you going to do? Sit around and be miserable? What's your alternative? That's the thing. Women keep throwing, but what about this and what about that? Trying to shoot my theory down. Well, their theory is nothing works. Well, come on. You know, keep going for it. And remember, I talk about how to train a man. If you give a man the right kind of feedback, generally, yes, you can get him to do stuff to where you're not constantly having to ask. But again, this is not a foolproof formula for success each and every time. The other thing you have to remember is men are long-term projects. It's not a quick fix. If you've been married just a few years and you're saying, how come I can't get him to do this what I want? Just because you haven't been married long enough. Keep working on the guy. What else are you going to do? Be miserable and frustrated? Just keep working on him. The good news is women can generally get a man to where they want him. They just need to remember it's a long-term project. You know, they need to think 20, 30 years. How can I get my husband to be like everybody else's husbands that are so nice and kind and considerate? First of all, you don't know what's going on in that other house. And you don't know what those husbands are really like. I have come to experience that some of the worst marriages are some of the ones that look the prettiest on the outside. Why? Because they're just as plastic as they can be. Don't judge and compare your relationship to other people's relationships. First of all, they're not you. They'll never be you. They don't even want to be you. So, don't do that. You shouldn't compare yourself to anybody, quite frankly. And the Bible tells us not to do that. I know women struggle with that a lot. They're constantly comparing themselves to how other women look and how other women's children behave and how other women That's why some of them have such low self-esteem. You don't generally see guys doing that. I don't see some really big, good-looking guy going by and think to myself, why can't I look like that? We don't think anything of it. So what? Who cares? We don't have that problem. But don't get into comparing yourself, your children, your relationship with your husband to other people's relationships. That's all you're going to do is get frustrated if you do that. Do spouses need to do the same things together all the time? No, they don't. I mean, you should try and find some things that you like to do together. Some activities, I think, and each couple will be different. Some couples do a lot of things together. Other couples hardly do anything together and are completely happy. Who cares? Again, don't compare yourself to other couples. This isn't a contest. You don't always have to do everything together. The truth is, even though you love each other deeply, you might have completely differing interests. So what? You can still have a happy life. I think some of the couples that really struggle the most are the ones who are trying to be this couple that they do everything together and they share everything together and they go everywhere together and la la la. First of all, very few people can hold up under those circumstances unless they like that as well. Secondly, I just think it's unrealistic. There's going to be things that your spouse will love to do that you won't want to do. I love to golf. Not a big thrill for my wife. Doesn't like golfing. My wife loves to shop. Not real big on my list. I don't care for it. I don't like it. I hate it. Now, I do it sometimes because I want, be on her good side. And if I asked her to come golfing with me and insisted, I'm sure she would. I don't really want her to. She's not that good. Unless we're just going to spend time, that kind of golfing, spend time hanging out. That's great. But if I'm out there trying to play a serious game of golf on a course with lots of people behind us, I hope she goes shopping so I can go golfing. And that's fine. It is vitally important that women not try and analyze the intention of their husbands' hearts all the time. And again, they're very quick to do that. It's not good enough that they did something. They want to know, why did he do it? What was he thinking? What was he feeling? La, 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 la. And you're going to make your marriage miserable doing that. The Bible says not to judge. What is judging? Judging is when somebody does something, you don't know why they do it, and then you give the reason why. That's judging. Someone does something, why did he do that? Well, because he's a big fat jerk, that's why. Well, you don't know that. You don't know what he was thinking. You don't know what that person was feeling. It's none of your stinking business. Don't be giving the reason for other people's behavior. Let their behavior stand on its own. You don't need to be sitting there analyzing everything all the time. That's judging, and that's when you get yourself in a lot of trouble. There's men who try and do things for their wives and get discouraged because even when they do that, it's not good enough because they didn't have the right attitude or the right feeling, or they didn't glance at their wife just right when they did it. Oh, man, that's a hard way to live. You're going to discourage any man like that. Leave the motivations of his heart to him and to his God, and leave him alone. Now, that's not to say you can't at times ask him about, his feelings and stuff. Lots of luck with that. Most guys aren't real big onto delving into their inner nether regions to express their feelings, but, judge a man by his actions. That's an old saying. Men like being judged by what I do, and don't try and analyze me. If you want to judge, if you feel compelled to judge, then judge in the positive way. If he does something, assume he did it for the best possible reasons. Now, that's something people usually don't do, see, because when we judge, it's usually the worst possible reason. Why did he do that? He just wants something out of me. Why did he say you were pretty? He just wants sex. What, just mean, If you're going to judge the best, assume the best. You'll find it's going to be much easier just not to judge at all and leave that alone. Self-image is very important. And in my seminar, I have a lot of fun at the women's expense on the, I'm too fat, I'm too oily, I'm too greasy, that whole thing. But let me say something to the guys about self-image. It's very important that you help create a positive self-image in your wife. Not only your wife, but your children as well. You need to be the protector of that home. Now, if you ask most guys, are you the protector of your home? Most of them will say, absolutely. Someone tries to break into my house at night, I got a bat and I'll bust them over the head, or I got a shotgun in the closet, I'll blow them away. Well, lovely, lovely, lovely. But there's more to being a real man than protecting your family from, some prowler in the middle of the night. You need to protect your family's spiritual and emotional well-being as well. And what's sad here is that a lot of men, not only do they fail to protect their family from emotional onslaughts, they are the greatest offender. While they should be the one protecting their family, they terrorize their family by saying horrible, critical things to their wives, to their children. You're not good enough. What's the matter with you? You're awfully fat. You're ugly. Why don't you take care of yourself? You're always a failure. I know you got a B+. You should have gotten an A. And just being horrible. And then they wonder why their wife feels terrible, wonder why their kids feel terrible, wonder why their daughters are shacking up with the first boy who pays attention to them. Why? Because you have not been there for them. You need to be a man. You need to be there and protect your family. That means more than just keeping bad people away. It means you need to take care of their self-image, their emotional state and well-being as well. You need to be a man. Quit walking around, just because you think you're a big tough guy. That's not enough. A real man truly protects his family. You need to be there for them. Probably the biggest baloney excuse men cough up to why they ignore their wife and children is because I'm doing this for us. I'm going to work for the next 5 years and ignore you entirely because I'm doing this for us. And I've got to put all this time in for us. Really? I mean, what you're doing in most cases is you're destroying us. If you're concerned about us, you need to pay attention to us and not just to your job. You say, well, then I won't climb up the ladder fast enough. Well, then slow down. It's not worth it. It's not going to make any sense for you to spend all this time paying attention to your job and then to lose your family. And I have seen this over and over again. Men who put such a high priority on financial security and ignore their family at the same time. Oh, man, How can you be so dumb? I tell you what, you wind up getting a divorce, you're going to lose all your financial security. It makes no sense to want to try and secure your financial future by working all the time and ignoring your wife. You'll wind up losing everything. It makes no sense. Think it through. If you truly want financial security, you have to pay attention to the girl. You have to go back for the girl. You have to go back for your family, because if they decide they have had enough, you're going to lose 50% of everything. You're going to wind up spending all this money in child support and alimony, and it makes no sense. It is a foolish, strictly on a financial level alone, it is completely foolish to work completely at your job and ignore your family. To say I'm doing this for our financial future is stupidity. That's like saying I want to build our future and spending as much money as you can at the same time. It makes no sense. You can't get there from here. You can't get to a secure financial future by ignoring your family. You've got to make them part of it. And if that means slowing down, climbing the corporate ladder, if that means slowing down from the amount of commitment you can give to the job, then so be it. I promise you, if you'll slow down, make sure you keep a healthy relationship with that woman and those children, that in the end you'll be along much further financially than all your buddies who are working like crazy and now are on wife 2 and 3 and paying alimony and lost everything in divorces. They might make a lot more money than you. Doesn't matter what you make. That is what you keep. And you go that path, you're not going to keep much of anything. A good example is what I do for couples in this Laugh Your Way seminar that I do. It would be easy for me to say to my wife, Deb, why don't you just let me go? We can cut down on expenses. I can save on half the airfare and the meals and stuff. You stay behind, and I'll build this organization. And then after 3, 4, 5 years, then you could start coming along with me. And see, I would never do that. I would never do that, because that doesn't make good financial sense. Because doing that creates a tear in the relationship. I'll be traveling all over Kingdom Come. She's not with me. There's a good chance in 5 years I won't have Debbie with me anymore. And then I lose everything. It just makes no sense. Some people think, they're helping their relationships by ignoring their family. They're not. The smartest thing I can do from a financial standpoint is to assume the expense of bringing her everywhere I go. That gives me a safe financial future. When I talk about sex to couples, I'm very careful to point out that one of the things that can mess it up for you is if you've been very sexually active before you get married. And I talk about some of the damage and stuff that can result from being sexually promiscuous before marriage. But I want to stress that it's not the end of the world for you. It's not like you can't have a great sex life. You can. You can have a wonderful sex life. It's just that for a lot of you, it's going to be just a little more difficult. You're going to have to be a little bit more deliberate. It won't come as easy and natural for you had you have waited. That's why God encourages people to wait. It's not because he's a prude. It's not because he's against people having a good time. He knows we're not wired that way. We get into this stuff, we'll pick up all kinds of struggles that we can deal with for the rest of our lives. But it's not that it's hopeless, it's just that you need to be more deliberate. Guys are going to need to be more deliberate. They can't keep closing their eyes and fantasizing back to some lustful scenario. It's destructive. You'll never get to a great sex life doing that. And women can't have an attitude of, gee, sex doesn't mean anything. It means everything in a relationship. It might not feel that way because of what you've been through in the past, but you're going to have to be more deliberate about it. Can the effects of excessive pornography and masturbation and all that sort of thing, can these things be reversed? Yes. But it's really hard. It's really hard. But yes, you can reverse these things. And you're going to have to go cold turkey. You're going to have to really even retrain your body. I mean, some of you guys who have been watching porn and masturbating 3, 4, 5 times a day since you were 13 years old, and then wondering why you can't perform with a woman, well, that's why you need to retrain your body. You've got to relearn things. And the only way you're going to get there is you're going to have to go cold turkey on that stuff and relearn how to have sex in a normal way. And I promise you, it'll be one of the hardest things you'll ever do in your life. That's why we've got to warn our kids. These idiots that are telling our young people that great sex can be had by masturbating and looking at porn and all that stuff, it is such a lie. It is destroying these young people's lives. It has the potential to wreck some of their sex lives forever. We need to warn our kids. There's a reason to stay away from this stuff. It is poisonous. It is destructive. It is not helpful. And those of you who are already into it and you want to get out of it, it's going to be a very difficult road for you. But yes, you can turn this around. What about masturbating if we're separated for long periods of time? Well, 2 things I want to underscore. First of all, why are you separated for long periods of time? If you've got a job that requires you to be separate from your family for long periods of time, you need to reevaluate your job. Now, of course, if you're in the military and they're sending you into a war zone or someplace, that you don't have much of a choice, that's different. But some of you guys who just have regular jobs and stuff, you have a job that you're gone from your wife and family for 3, 4, 5, 6 months out of the year, you need to reevaluate that. That's number 1. Number 2, my biggest thing about masturbating and why I'm so against it in marriage is in the context of 2 people living together and ignoring each other, and instead of making love to each other, they make love to themselves. That's what I'm against. If you're separated for long periods of time, I understand that. That's not the end of the world. I will say this. It's a short-term fix. It's not real sex. If there's anything I want people to get through their heads is masturbating is not real sex. You want great sex? You want real sex? For the love of God, stop masturbating. Pay attention to your spouse. That's the only way to get there. I think teenagers should hear my whole sex talk. I think teenagers should hear my whole seminar, quite frankly. There's nothing I'm going to say that most of them haven't heard in spades. Every once in a while, I'll run into an adult who gets freaky because I say something like masturbate or something, and they're afraid their teenagers will die if they hear this. If your teenager lives in that much of a sheltered world, then yes, you need to approach it differently and don't give them my DVD. But that's not most teenagers. Most teenagers have heard about this stuff in spades, and the drag is they're hearing it from the wrong side, and they're hearing very bad information, very destructive information. Hollywood glorifies masturbating. Hollywood glorifies porn. Hollywood glorifies one-night stands. They make it look wonderful and great and fantastic, but it is a lie from the pit of hell. It is not great, wonderful, and fantastic. It is destructive. It has the potential to ruin your child's sex life, and no one's telling them that. And if you can't tell them, sit them down and let me tell them. A lot of people will ask me, well, how come you don't talk about healing? That God can heal you from sexual damage. Well, I believe God can heal anybody from anything. I've no problem with that. But I think sometimes we're a little bit too quick to just tell people, don't worry, you shouldn't do that, but it'll be okay. God will heal you. Not everybody gets healed. And it's a cavalier attitude that's not healthy. It's like me saying to my children, you shouldn't play on the roof, but if you do play on the roof and you fall off and break all your arms and legs, that's okay, God will heal you. Well, you never think like that. But yeah, that's the way the church acts. Yeah, you shouldn't have sex before marriage, and I know you can have damage, but don't worry, God can heal you. For some people, yeah, they might just instantly get healed. Their arms and legs will get all straightened out right away. A lot of people will wind up having to go through a lot of painful surgery from breaking all their arms and legs. Some people might struggle to walk because when they were kids, they kept falling off the roof and breaking their legs. That's the reality of life. So I am all for healing. According to your faith, let it be done unto you. God can do wonderful things of healing in your heart and in your life. But, the reality is not everybody gets that kind of a miracle. And let me add this as well. It's interesting that the Bible talks about human beings being made up of three parts, just like God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We too have a body, we have a soul, our mind, our intellect, and then we have a spirit. Our spirit is instantly changed when we come to a place of faith. That's why it's referred to as being born again. It's like something happens to you. Physically, God can touch and transform you and do miracles in you physically, as I just mentioned. But it's interesting when it comes to the mind, Paul encourages the Christians. He says, you need to be transformed in your mind. Well, how, Paul? How do I do that? Just lay hands on me and God's going to instantly change the way I think? No. He says you need to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You need to change the way you think. And it's interesting that a lot of the sexual damage that I'm talking about isn't really physical damage. I mean, sometimes there is. That's really the easy healing. It's the soul. It's the mental part of our heads. And the Bible doesn't talk a whole lot about instant healing in your head. It talks about you changing the way you think, being renewed deliberately and intentionally. And that's what I'm talking to couples about. Those who have struggled in this area because of damage that they picked up before they got married, because they got involved in sexual things before. A lot of it's all here. And there is no presto changeo solution to that. You need to change the way you think, and just starting with the fact that you need to understand that it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to work on it to get to where you want, is what I'm trying to do for couples. In my seminar, I talk about this whole idea of the initiator. Who initiates sex? This is one of the biggest fights couples have and struggles couples have. And as I said in my seminar, I cannot emphasize it enough. Who cares? It doesn't matter who instigates it. And I'll tell you, in virtually every relationship, there's one person who is the initiator. It's almost always that way. You have one person who's much more interested in sex than the other. Sometimes it's the wife who's more interested in sex than the guy. Those guys actually have the biggest struggle because they feel really bad because she thinks, well, that's the guy who's supposed to initiate sex. Well, says who? Just because that's how most people are. Just whatever your relationship is, just take it and go with it. Quit trying to put some cookie cutter over the top of it. If sometimes your wife initiates sex, sometimes your husband, great. God bless you both. Wonderful. If you're in a relationship where you're the only one who initiates all the time, who cares? It's not a contest. As long as you're both happy and you're both being sexually fulfilled. Now, part of this struggle comes because so many men have been exposed to pornography today. And quite frankly, it doesn't even have to be pornography, just regular movies. Just looking at TV commercials. I mean, the picture is of women who want sex. I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. After a while, the guy's thinking, how come my wife never acts like that? Well, first of all, she's not being paid to act like that. And the word is true, act. It's not reality. Get that nonsense out of your head. It doesn't matter. If you have a husband who never pays attention to you, and the only time he pays attention to you is when he wants to have sex, this is not a good thing. You need to start standing your ground a little bit and getting this man involved in your life. I talk about this when I talk to women about the whole idea of give and take, about the idea of, conditional relationships versus unconditional relationships. How a lot of Christian women believe that unconditional love means you should have an unconditional relationship, that no matter what he does, no matter how he acts, I should just put out for him no matter what. That's pure nonsense. God loves us unconditionally, but he demands a conditional relationship. I mean, you want God to answer a prayer? You have to ask him. Well, that's conditional. And here's the kicker. Jesus says God knows what you need before you ask him. Well, now, wait a minute. If God knows what I need before I ask him, and he wants to make sure I have everything that I need before I ask him, then why do I have to ask him? Because that's the condition. There are conditions involved. You want God to forgive you, you have to apologize. You want God to draw close to you, the Bible says you have to draw close to him. There's all kinds of conditions in relationships. An unconditional relationship where you require nothing out of anyone is a formula for disaster. If you're having sex with a guy or a woman who never does anything for you at all, you need to reevaluate yourself. That is not a healthy relationship. Now, the Bible says we should not deny each other, but as I said in my seminar, just because you have conditions doesn't mean you're denying anybody. You need to start getting that person involved in your life. Do I think it's okay to use sex to get what you want? It's kind of a loaded question. I mean, the reality is it's okay to use everything to get what you want. I mean, that's what a relationship is, give and take. It's all part of this. If you think that you can have a relationship where there's automatic giving without anybody investing anything, you're living in a fantasy world. A lot of guys are like that. They treat their wives horribly. They ignore them constantly. They never talk to them. And then they wonder, well, how come I ain't getting any sex? Well, because you're a dope. That's why. There's always something somewhere where there's a trade-off in relationships. Somehow, when there's this trade-off concept, people feel that it's being polluted. Women primarily think that's polluting it. But that's why I talk about bartering in my seminar. Yes, it's okay to use something to get something. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you're doing it in an abusive, manipulative, backstabbing, destructive way, then of course, then you don't even need to ask the question. That's wrong. But don't think it's weird to use things to get things. This is a healthy thing. And the best thing is be very open and honest about it. Then you're not manipulating. You say, hey, baby, I'll give you this if you give me that. Whatever the deal is. Then there's no manipulation. There's no dishonesty involved. There's give and take in all relationships. There's a cause and effect in everything in life. And relationships are equally as true. You only get something because something happens. If you go to work, that's why you get a paycheck. You don't just show up and get a paycheck. You have to work first. There's cause and effect. Sadly, we're living in a time where people are not getting that today. And it's getting worse. I mean, there's literally people who don't understand why they don't get paid more at their job, even though they don't do anything. They're thoroughly confused. They don't get it. How come I'm not getting a raise? How come I'm not getting moved up the ladder? How come? Well, because you don't do anything. Because you're not working. Because you're not contributing. There's cause and effect. Why isn't my marriage getting better? It should just get better just because. He should give me just because. She should do something just because. No, there's cause and effect in everything. In relationships, at your job, at every area of your life. If you don't put anything into something, you're not going to get anything out. A lot of people, when it comes to their marriages, quite frankly, when it comes to their spiritual life, when it comes to even their jobs, they're like a farmer who sits in front of their land and wonders why the corn isn't growing, even though he hasn't put any in. And he looks at all the farmers around him and says, well, that guy over there has a good corn growing. He has a great marriage. He has a great relationship. How come that guy got a raise? How come all this other stuff? How come mine isn't? Because you haven't planted anything. You need to put in to get out. And to think that putting in to get out is a manipulative, wrong thing, man, you're crazy. The whole concept of planting and reaping is completely based on the concept of you'll get something if you put something in. That's perfectly normal. Sometimes someone will ask, well, what do I do if my husband wants sex all the time? Well, if he literally wants sex all the time, there's something wrong with him. You might want to go check that out at the doctor's. But I think what they mean is, why is he constantly coming back for sex? Because sex is an appetite. It always comes back. You can't just say, hey, I fed you lunch yesterday. Why are you back today? Why don't you wait for next month? Then I'll feed you lunch again. Well, because they need to eat. It's part of the appetites. Now, obviously, it's not as bad as actually physically eating. You don't need sex 3 times a day. You know, I'm sure some people would think that would be great, but you know, certainly don't need it. But the sex drive, the sex need does keep coming back. It always comes back. It's always coming back. And actually, it's a good thing. As I point out in my seminar, particularly for men, this is God's way of constantly reminding you, be nice to that girl, or you ain't getting any. And sometimes it's the woman. Sometimes it's the woman that's strong in this area and not the guy. Well, it's the same true for her. It's God's way of letting her know. Pay attention to the boy. Be nice to the boy. You take away, really, you take away the sexual appetite. What is the fundamental motivating factor to put a man and a woman together? So you can be buddies? So you can watch TV together? I mean, I know women are mortified about it. Marriage shouldn't be about sex. But I'm telling you, sex is the foundation. You take that away, I don't think we'd spend a whole lot of time working on our situations with women. That's the main deal. Sometimes people will complain that they don't think their husband turns them on enough, or wife turns them on enough. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that. There could be lots of reasons for that. It could be the result of pornography. Pornography makes real sex unrealistic, and it can ruin it for you. There might be something physically wrong. Remember, sex is an appetite. It would be like physically if all of a sudden you said, I don't want to eat anymore. Well, there's usually something wrong. I guess that's my point. If you really don't have any interest in your spouse sexually, you're not interested in sex at all, you owe it to your spouse. You don't have the right to ignore your spouse sexually. If you have absolutely no interest, you need to check and see what's wrong. It might be a physical problem. It might be a physiological problem. It might be an emotional problem. Whatever the problem is, you need to check it out. It might be an addiction problem, pornography, or drugs, or alcohol. I mean, there's lots of reasons. Healthy, normal people want healthy, normal sex. That's just the bottom line. If that's missing, there might be something wrong. And I can't answer all those questions. I'm not a doctor, nor am I a psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm just me. But if you get into that kind of situation, you really ought to look and see what's wrong. There might be sexual abuse in the past. A lot of times people will ask me, what about sexual abuse? Again, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and I don't have all the answers for everybody. In extreme circumstances and situations, if you're in a relationship, you're dealing with an extreme circumstance, an extreme situation, you need to go and get help. I can say this, that for you not to do anything about it is wrong. You can't just not do anything about it. Just say, well, I'm not interested, or I don't want to anymore. And your spouse tries to get you to get help, and you just say no. That's wrong. You don't have the right to do that. You're part of this person's life. And if something's not healthy, if something's not right, you need to go find some help. I will say this, that it's very possible that there is nothing physically wrong with somebody with a sex problem. A lot of times sex problems are really relationship problems. There's relational problems. And, at least you need to answer the question and settle the question if there is something physically wrong. If there's not, then it's probably lying more in an emotional place than in a physical place. Now, some people ask me, what do I do if sex gets boring? Well, first of all, if sex is boring to you, isn't that a little odd? I mean, we're saying sex. If you say sex and boring in the same context, something's probably not right. And you need to pursue that. Now, a lot of people use that in the context of pornography. Usually, take it to the bank. Usually, if someone's bored with sex or complaining about sex in that way, they've got their head in the toilet somewhere looking at pornography. And pornography will ruin sex for anybody. It's not a healthy thing. Nobody looks like that. Nobody does that kind of stuff. Nobody is this animal passion that these actors are acting out in these porn things. A lot of people who have porn addictions, they're destroying their own sex life. The very thing they want, they're not going to get if they use porn. You need to get some help. And for those couples that are struggling with this, usually a guy, and sometimes some women as well, but the spouse of the person who's addicted, you need to understand something. It's an addiction, just like heroin addiction, just like alcohol addiction. It's not going to make you feel good. You'll feel bad when there's a sexual addiction involved, but help your spouse through it. And if you're addicted, you need to get some help. I've talked to people who have been addicted to porn, who are also addicted to heroin and alcoholism, who told me of all their addictions, the porn was the hardest one to get rid of. Think about that. Heroin addiction. Saying it's easier to go cold turkey on heroin than on porn. That's how addictive pornography is. It's a destructive, evil thing that will ruin your life. And if you're caught into that, you need to get out of that mess. And if you're really stuck in it, you're going to need to get some help. Now, we have a program on our website that you can do online. It's called Pure Online. If you go to our website, you'll see a link there where you can sign up for this 30-day program where you can interactively using your computer for something positive for once to help you break the problem of sexual addiction. But it's hard. It's going to be hard, just like kicking heroin. I mean, people who go cold turkey, they describe it as the most worst physical situation they've ever gone through. And then these same guys say it was harder to give up porn. I mean, that's how bad porn is. The spouse needs to be patient, but you need to do something, and you need to go cold turkey. But what you need to understand fundamentally is what you're wanting, which is great sex. Porn will keep you away from great sex. It'll make normal sex boring to you. It'll make it passé. It's sad. Men get to the point where they can't even perform physically because they're so used to be stimulated, highly stimulated by these porn images. I know of men who insist on having dirty magazines open while they're making love to their wives. I don't know how they manipulate that out of the woman, but they do. Why would they do such a thing? Because they're so addicted, they can't perform unless they see these images. Man, if you're in that place, you got to realize you've got a serious problem. Both of you got to realize there's a serious problem involved, and you have got to get help. And it's time that you stop dumping on your wife or your husband or whoever's doing it and using your addiction as a way to criticize the other person. You're not sexy enough. You're not this enough. You don't do that enough. You don't turn me on enough. You're boring. It's not your spouse's problem. You've got the problem. You need to change. You need to stop. You need to get some help. I end my seminars with this idea of a reset button, and I have couples stand up and apologize to each other. And oftentimes couples will ask me, how can I keep that going? Well, the only way you can really keep it going is to learn to say, I'm sorry. What's amazing is a lot of these couples, when they're repeating what I'm telling them to repeat, that's the first time they've ever apologized to each other. Some people really have a hard time in this area. I've never quite understood it. I mean, I apologize to people a lot because I mess up a lot. I can't imagine these people. They must live such perfect, sheltered lives that it must be wonderful to be them. That they never make mistakes, that they never are wrong, that they never do something stupid, that they never have to say, I'm sorry. Man, it must be wonderful to be you. Of course, I'm being facetious. It's got to be horrible to be, what's going to be horrible to be around you is really what it's got to be. You need to learn how to apologize. You make a mistake, you do something, you hurt somebody, you need to say, I'm sorry. You were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. The hardest words in the world for some people to say. If you can keep that going, you can keep that reset button of forgiveness that keeps setting things straight going in your life. But you've got to say it. If you don't say it, it's really hard to forgive people who don't ask. Now, which brings to the next question. What if they never ask that they're sorry? Then you still need to try and forgive them. I mean, that's the hardest. That's the hardest kind of forgiveness. The hardest kind of forgiveness is forgiving someone who won't ask for it. But just for your health, you need to forgive them even if he's so stubborn or she's so stubborn and hard-hearted she won't ask for forgiveness. If they're that proud, forgive them anyway. That's my advice. Grab the reset button and push it anyway, even though they don't want you to push it. But my advice is, man, your life will be so much better if you'll just learn to say, I was wrong. I apologize. Let's try it again.